10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 296. Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 296 of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. This is our Lick of the Month episode, and we're going to use this as an opportunity to take a look at some licks over our tritone substitutions of the long 2-5-1 progression. I've prepared some actual written lines for you this week. We have got a ton of material to go through, but first just wanted to remind you that a great way to support this show is by joining our Patreon. We are a listener-supported program, which means that we do not do any advertisements on the show. Instead, we rely on listeners like you to keep the show going with a small donation each and every month. And for that donation, you do get a PDF for every single episode, along with audio examples and a bunch of awesome jazz education materials. So if you want to sign up for that, go to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, and go over there and learn about the different levels of support and what you get for those levels. And thank you so much to everybody that is supporting the show. Wanted to give a quick shout out to a bunch of new patrons this week. Thank you to our new $5 patrons, Bloomfield, John, Michael, Eliezer, Harry, and Alexander. Also want to say thank you to our new $3 patrons. Thank you to John, Mary, Kevin, and Jim. Also, thank you to Mary and Ray for editing their pledges from $3 to $5. And of course, to everybody else over there that's been supporting the show for months and years. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We could not do this without you. Again, that is 10minutejazzlesson.com. Click on one of the Patreon banners. Get yourself signed up today. All right, so last week we talked about the substitutions that we were going to use, and we laid out several different chord progressions that we were going to use with our tritone subs. This week, what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've written two licks over each one of those progressions. You'll recall in last week's episode, I just improvised over them so you could get kind of a sense of the general sound and wrap your head around those substitutions. This week, we're really going to dig into the nitty-gritty of lines that you can take with you as examples and use as models for writing your own lines and eventually improvising using these tritone substitutions. So before we jump into the actual lines, I want to give you an idea of how I structured them. So basically what I've done is on the first line over each progression, I've structured it using triads. Especially over where the substitution happens, I am only using a triad. And for those of you that have known me for a while, you know that I love triads because they are the easiest and simplest and clearest way to outline a key. So that is why I have chosen triads for the first example on each progression. Now, the second one uses a very similar device, but one that is a little bit different, and that is the pattern 1, 2, 3, 5. It's so close to just using a triad, but we get the advantage of having that 2 in there. That's going to make it sound a little bit different. It's going to make it sound more scale-based, of course. So for each progression, the second example is based off of 1, 2, 3, 5, especially when it is over that tritone substitution. Okay, so let's dive right into our first example. I'm going to play them for you. So if you have the PDF, pull it out now and follow along in your respective key for your respective instrument. So this one is where we have the regular old 2 chord for one measure, and then we substitute the 5 chord with the tritone sub. So in concert pitch, this would be a concert G7 chord, but instead for the second measure, we are going to spend the entire measure playing concert D flat. and we're just using the triad on the first example, and then on the second example we're using that 1 2 3 5 pattern. So here is me playing both of these lines as examples, one right after the other. So you can hear the big difference between just using the triads and then putting in that one passing note, which is the 2, to create that 1 2 3 5. It really does give it a different sound while both devices are pretty simple and easy to think about. It really does change things. So those are the two approaches that I want you to take. All right, let's go on to lines 3 and 4. So in this one, we have a regular 2 chord. And then we start the second measure with the regular 5 chord, concert G7. And then in the second half of the second measure, we do our tritone substitution. So we put in a concert D flat 7. Right there at the end of the 2-5-1, we are backloading all of the tension. And again, in the third line, I'm going to be using just triads. And in the fourth line, I'm going to be using that 1 2 3 5 pattern. So here are lines 3 and 4. So that's a great one for not a lot of tension. If you're not looking to get too outside sounding too fast, that's a great one because the majority of the 2-5 is right inside, and then we only have that tension, that tritone substitution right at the end. So that could be a good place to start with that particular progression. All right, let's go on to lines 5 and 6. So what we've done in this one is we've replaced the 2 chord with the 5 chord. So the first measure is concert G7 for the entire measure. And then in the second measure, we've done an entire measure of the tritone sub. So the second measure of the 2-5 is all concert D flat 7. And this is going to give us a little bit more tension. And again, this is going to give us a bit of a different sound over the 2 chord because we are actually superimposing the 5 chord over where the 2 chord should be. Again, first line, line 5, is going to be triad based, and line 6 is going to be 1 2 3 5 based. Here's lines 5 and 6. And I love that progression because it adds some interest to the 2 chord without going super outside. So again, that could be a good place to start if you're looking for some new sounds, but you don't quite want to go completely outside of the chord changes. If the tension is still just too much for your ears, that would be another great progression. All right, here are 7 and 8, and what we've done in this is we've done the full 2-5 over the first measure in the original key, so concert D minor 7 to G7 all put into one measure, and then over the second measure we've subbed out a 2-5 up a tritone, so the entire 2-5 is up a tritone, concert A flat minor 7 to concert D flat 7 in the second measure, and then we resolve the whole thing to that 1 chord in the third measure. All right, so here are lines 7 and 8. So you might be thinking that those lines sound a lot like lines 1 and 2, and you'd be right about that. It's a very similar concept, but I feel like if you have the 2 and the 5 in each measure, it allows you to approach it in a bit of a different way than if you were just doing the 2 chord and then the tritone sub. I definitely think about that in a different way. I'm trying to play a complete 2/5 in each of those measures. So it does sound similar, but it does give you a bit of a different sound than 1 and 2. All right, let's go on to our final 2 lines. These are lines 9 and 10. And in this one, I've just subbed out the entire 2/5 for another 2/5, a tritone up. So measure 1 is going to be A flat minor 7 concert pitch, and measure 2 is going to be D flat 7 concert pitch. So I've just removed the original 2/5 and subbed it out completely for a 2/5, a tritone up, and this one is the most out-sounding in my opinion, especially that first measure. This is one of my favorite ways to utilize the tritone substitution, but is very, very challenging to hear and conceive of. So take a little while before you get to this one. All right, here's lines 9 and 10. Okay, and there are all of our lick of the month lines, 10 of them, in fact. So this is going to give you a lot to dive into, right? 10 different lines. So what I would suggest is grabbing the PDF, playing through them, reading through them, with a 2/5 backing track, getting that sound in your ears, and then pick some things that you like, leave the things that you don't like behind, and write some of your own lines. Maybe write one line over each one of those different progressions. And then ultimately what you want to do is you want to move from writing stuff to just actually improvising with those substituted chord changes. But take your time. It takes you a while to wrap your ears around this and the concepts and actually be able to use it in real life. So don't think that you're going to, get this PDF and then a day later you're going to go on a gig and be the tritone substitution master. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that quickly. You've got to take some time and get that stuff embedded in your ears. All right. Now you can get the PDF with all of those lines, and you can also get audio examples of me playing them on the Patreon site, 10minutejazzlesson.com. Click on one of the Patreon banners, get yourself signed up. You can see all the tiers and what you will get for each one of those. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you've got any questions, please drop them in the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson community Facebook page, or you can always get in touch with me at 10minutejazzlesson@gmail.com. All right. We will be back next week with a tune of the month, and you guessed it, we're going to be doing a bunch of tritone substitutions over that tune, and then we'll continue on next month with the second half of this series. Hope you're all doing well, staying safe and healthy. It's pretty crazy out there, and we will talk to you soon. Have a good weekend, everybody. Bye.